The Cocolistli. The year is 1545. You are standing in the ruins of a civilization that was already a ruin. The Aztec Empire fell to Cortés 24 years ago. The survivors are rebuilding. And then something far worse than any conquistador arrives. It has no name. It has no face. Within 5 years, it will kill more people than the entire conquest did. Conservative estimates place the death toll at 5 million. Upper estimates reach 15 million. In 5 years, potentially 80% of the surviving indigenous population of central Mexico, people who had already survived smallpox, measles, and military conquest. In 2018, a team led by geneticist Oshild Vogany at the Max Planck Institute extracted ancient DNA from the teeth of 29 individuals buried at Tepozcalula, Yucunda in Oaxaca and found Salmonella enterica paratyphi in 10 of them, proposing it as a strong candidate for the epidemic, though the authors themselves were careful to say they were not asserting it was the definitive or sole cause. Case closed, supposedly. But Spanish colonial physician Francisco Hernandez described hemorrhaging from the eyes, nose, and mouth. Salmonella paratyphi does not do that. The bacterium is identified. The death toll is not explained. The kill rate rivals the most catastrophic epidemics in recorded history, comparable in proportional terms only to the Black Death, which killed roughly half of Western Europe, and has never been explained by any single confirmed pathogen. Some researchers now ask whether the DNA tells us the secondary infection, not the primary killer. Was there a hemorrhagic co-pathogen, possibly viral, that left nothing recoverable in ancient bone? The Cocolistli at least left us bodies to test. The next disease left only prayers. The Hittite plague? The year is 1322 before the Common Era. The Hittite Empire is the most powerful military force on earth. They have fought Egypt to a standstill. Their chariots dominate from Anatolia to the Levant. Then from somewhere along their own supply routes, something invisible arrives. It will kill 2 kings. It will last 20 years. The empire will never fully recover. The evidence doesn't come from bones or DNA. It comes from clay. Cuneiform tablets excavated at Hattusa since 1906 by German archaeologist Hugo Winkler include plague prayer texts written by Hittite King Mursili II, some of the oldest first-person accounts of epidemic disease ever found. Mursili's predecessor, Suppiluliuma I, the king who brought the Hittites to their greatest power, died of the disease. Suppiluliuma's son and successor, Arnuwanda II, also died of it within a year of taking the throne. 2 consecutive kings, 1 unidentified pathogen. Mursili's texts, preserved across at least 7 separate tablets in Istanbul and Berlin, specifically blame Egyptian prisoners of war as the vector, making this potentially the earliest recorded description of a disease spreading through military prisoner transport. Historians have proposed tularemia based on symptom fragments in the prayers, but no ancient DNA has ever confirmed it. The identification is built entirely on inference from a desperate king's theological investigation. Mursili himself couldn't name it, neither can we. From prayers carved into clay, we cross the Mediterranean to the epidemic that should have the clearest answer of all, and doesn't: the plague of Athens. The year is 430 before the Common Era. Athens is at war with Sparta and winning on every metric that matters: philosophy, trade, naval power, democratic government. Then a ship docks at Piraeus. Something walks off the gangplank that no Athenian army can fight. Within 4 years, 1 in 4 Athenians will be dead. The historian Thucydides didn't just record this epidemic. He survived it. His clinical description in the history of the Peloponnesian War is forensically extraordinary. violent heat in the head, red inflamed eyes, descent to the throat and chest, unquenchable thirst, convulsions, and in some cases gangrene of the fingers and genitals. In 2006, a team led by Manolis Papagrigorakis at the University of Athens published analysis of ancient DNA extracted from a mass grave beneath Kerameikos, claiming to identify Salmonella enterica typhi, typhoid fever. The identification was immediately disputed by a second research team who argued the methodology was prone to contamination-induced false positives and that the result demonstrated the sequence was possibly Salmonella, but clearly not typhoid. But medical historians objected immediately. Classical typhoid does not cause gangrene. It does not produce the hemorrhagic eye symptoms Thucydides describes. Approximately 30 competing identifications have been proposed since the 19th century, including smallpox, measles, Ebola, typhus, and toxic shock syndrome. Researchers have proposed staphylococcal toxic shock, typhus, and hemorrhagic fever among the candidates, each matching some of Thucydides' symptoms while failing to account for others. The Athenian general Pericles, architect of democracy, died of it in 429 before the Common Era. The most documented epidemic in classical history remains medically unsolved. Some researchers ask whether the primary pathogen was hemorrhagic and viral, the kind that leaves no recoverable DNA in ancient bone at all. Athens fell from within. The next civilization was destroyed while trying to save itself. The plague of Cyprian. The year is 252 of the Common Era. Rome is already cracking. Barbarian pressure on every frontier, 3 emperors dead in a decade. Then a bishop sits down and writes the most terrifying disease account in Roman history. He is describing what he is watching from his window. Roman historian Zosimus records 5,000 deaths per day in Rome at the epidemic's height. Bishop Cyprian of Carthage, writing in his theological treatise De Mortalitate around 252, described bowels collapsing into continuous flux, extremities blackening and falling away, eyes on fire. 2 emperors, Hostilian in 251 and Claudius Gothicus in 270, are believed to have died of it. The epidemic's main wave lasted from approximately 251 to 262, over a decade, with a possible resurgence reaching into 270, though scholars debate whether the later deaths represent the same continuous outbreak or a separate recurrence. In 2013 and 2014, an Italian-American archaeological mission in Luxor excavated a mass burial site with bodies covered in thick layers of calcium oxide, quicklime, alongside a large kiln used to burn infected materials. Romans understood biological containment centuries before germ theory. Historian Kyle Harper of the University of Oklahoma argued in his 2017 book, The Fate of Rome, that this epidemic was among the most proportionally devastating in Roman history, comparable in its structural impact to the Black Death. And yet no pathogen has ever been confirmed. 13 years without burning out. That specific duration doesn't fit any single known infectious disease. Ebola collapses in months. Influenza builds immunity. Something about this pathogen's behavior has no modern equivalent. From the empire's slow internal hemorrhage, we cross the world to find the same catastrophe happening simultaneously half a planet away. The Antonine Plague and the Han Dynasty mirror. The year is 166 of the Common Era. The Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty together govern more than half the world's population. Their merchants have traded along the Silk Road for a century. Then, within 15 years of each other, both superpowers are struck by devastating epidemics that kill their emperors, collapse their armies, and from which neither fully recovers. The Roman epidemic was described in clinical detail by the physician Galen, who treated patients at its peak and documented skin pustules appearing on the 9th day of illness, a timeline consistent with smallpox, though ancient DNA confirmation has never been achieved. Roman military census records show measurable unit strength reductions of an estimated 30 to 40% during the epidemic years. The Han Dynasty epidemic is recorded in Chinese dynastic chronicles and in Zhang Zhongjing's Shanghan Lun, written around 200 of the Common Era directly in response. Zhang states explicitly in his preface that his own clan of more than 200 people lost 2/3 of its members to epidemic disease within a decade. Historian Kyle Harper argues in The Fate of Rome that the Antonine Plague's demographic losses directly caused Rome to recruit barbarian federates at scale, the structural shift that made the Western Empire ungovernable. The Silk Road was not theoretical in 166. It was operational, with documented Roman merchants reaching Han territory as early as 97 of the Common Era. Some historians now ask whether a single pathogen entered both ends of the same trade network simultaneously, and whether that invisible event was the hinge on which the entire ancient world turned. The Justinian Plague. The year is 541 of the Common Era. Emperor Justinian has spent 15 years doing the impossible. He has reconquered North Africa. He has reconquered Italy. He is within reach of reuniting the Roman Empire for the first time in a century. Then a ship docks at Pelusium on Egypt's eastern Nile Delta, and everything he built begins to die faster than his armies ever could. Byzantine historian Procopius recorded 10,000 deaths per day in Constantinople at the epidemic's peak. The Justinian plague is the earliest confirmed outbreak of Yersinia pestis, bubonic plague, in Western history. In 2013, a landmark study by Wagner and colleagues published in the Lancet Infectious Diseases extracted ancient DNA from a 6th century plague burial in Bavaria and confirmed the pathogen, establishing it as the ancestral root of all subsequent plague pandemics, including the Black Death. A 2019 study by Keller and colleagues in PNAS traced the strain's geographic origin to Central Asia via phylogenetic analysis of ancient genomes. Byzantine tax records from Egypt show a drop of approximately 40% in registered taxpayers in the Nile Delta within a decade of the first wave. The epidemic returned in at least 15 additional waves between 541 and 750. And here is what the textbooks quietly omit. Justinian's reconquest collapsed when reinforcements could no longer be sent. Roughly 90 years later, the armies of the early Islamic Caliphate advanced into those ruins and met almost no resistance. Some historians now ask whether a bacterium from Central Asia, in killing two empires simultaneously, made the medieval world inevitable. The Plague of Shiro. The year is 628 of the Common Era. The Sasanian Persian Empire has just survived 30 years of war with Byzantium. It has captured Jerusalem. It has besieged Constantinople. By every military measure, it is one of the most formidable powers on earth. Then in a single year, the emperor dies, his son and successor dies, and the royal court is decimated by an epidemic so swift it collapses 3 centuries of Persian civilization before anyone can respond. Kavad II took the Persian throne in 628 and immediately negotiated peace with Byzantium, ending the devastating Roman-Persian wars. He appeared to be the man who would stabilize the empire. Within months, he was dead. His son Ardashir III was a child. He was assassinated. Over the following 4 years, 12 rulers occupied the Persian throne. The Nihayat al-Arab of al-Nuwayri and the Syriac Chronicle of Sayr Both name epidemic disease, consistent with the wider Justinian plague pandemic, as the cause of the court's collapse. Historian Parvaneh Poursheriad's 2008 book Decline and Fall of the Sasanian Empire documents the simultaneous collapse of centralized military command as regional governors refused to reinforce the throne. When Yazdegerd III finally stabilized power in 632, he inherited a gutted empire. That same year, the armies of the early Islamic Caliphate began their campaigns. By 651, the Sasanian Empire, which had endured for over 4 centuries since its founding in 224 of the Common Era, was completely gone. Court intrigue doesn't kill 12 rulers in 4 years. Some researchers argue the epidemic was not a side note to this collapse. It was the story, the Tiwanaku collapse. They built the Gate of the Sun at an altitude where every breath is a struggle. 3,800 meters above sea level on the shores of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. They raised the stone blocks of Pumapunku, each weighing up to 131 metric tons, without wheeled vehicles or iron tools. They fed hundreds of thousands through a raised field agricultural system so sophisticated that modern engineers have tried to replicate it. And then, around 1000 of the Common Era, they stopped. The fields flooded, the city emptied. The standard explanation is drought. Climatologist Lonnie Thompson of Ohio State University confirmed a catastrophic multi-decadal drought beginning around 1000 of the Common Era through ice core data extracted from the nearby Quelccaya Glacier. But Tiwanaku had survived droughts before. 6 centuries of expansion and building don't collapse because of a drought the civilization had weathered previously. Bioarchaeologist Tiffany Tung's analysis of skeletal remains from the Tiwanaku colony at Omo in the Moquegua Valley documented periosteal lesions and skeletal stress markers consistent with acute systemic infectious disease escalating sharply in the final occupation layers. Archaeologist Clark Erickson of the University of Pennsylvania established that Tiwanaku's raised field system was capable of sustaining the population through moderate drought, suggesting the fields weren't gradually abandoned but suddenly and completely vacated, consistent with population collapse rather than migration. No successor civilization occupied the Tiwanaku heartland for several centuries after. Some researchers now propose the drought degraded the agricultural base, malnutrition, maximized disease susceptibility, and an epidemic delivered the killing blow. From South America's silent Altiplano, we travel backward in time by 2,000 years to find something even larger. Not one civilization collapsing, but 7 simultaneously. The Bronze Age Collapse Pandemic. The year is approximately 1200 before the Common Era. You are living in one of the most sophisticated networks of civilization the ancient world has ever produced. Mycenaean Greece is trading with Egypt. The Hittites are exchanging ambassadors with Babylon. The port city of Ugarit on the Syrian coast connects 3 continents. Within 50 years, all of it will be gone. Mycenae abandoned. Ugarit burned and never rebuilt. The Hittite Empire erased from the map. Egypt diminished beyond recovery. Historian Eric Klein of George Washington University synthesized decades of research in his 2014 book 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, identifying at least 7 distinct civilizations that fell within the same 50-year window. A clay tablet found at Ugarit, dated to approximately 1185 before the Common Era, describes the city sending a desperate message to Cyprus reporting an enemy fleet offshore and begging for grain. It is the last known document from the city. Brandon Drake's 2013 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science confirmed severe regional drought beginning around 1200 before the Common Era through stable isotope data from cave formations across the eastern Mediterranean. Egyptian temple inscriptions at Medinet Hapu from the reign of Ramesses III, approximately 1177 before the Common Era, describe the Sea People's invasions alongside plague and famine as simultaneous catastrophes, a detail routinely ignored in military-focused analyses. Some researchers now ask whether epidemic disease, spreading through the extensive maritime trade networks connecting all 7 civilizations, was the missing variable that turned a bad century into total erasure. 7 civilizations fell together. The last disease on this list is smaller in scale, but in some ways it is the most impossible of all. The English sweating sickness. The year is 1485. Henry Tudor has just won the English crown at Bosworth Field. He rides into London as King Henry VII. Within days of his arrival, a disease breaks out in the city that no one has ever seen before. It kills within hours. People healthy at breakfast are dead by evening. It will return 4 more times over the following 66 years. And then, in 1551, it will vanish from the earth as completely and mysteriously as it arrived, leaving no identified pathogen, no confirmed origin, and no explanation that satisfies modern medicine. Physician Thomas Forestier wrote one of the first clinical descriptions in 1485. John Caius wrote an entire book about it in 1552, immediately after the final outbreak. The symptom profile is medically anomalous in multiple directions simultaneously. Onset was sudden. Some victims died within 1 hour of first symptoms, according to Caius's account. Primary symptoms included drenching sweat, violent headache, extreme neck and shoulder pain, delirium, and heart palpitations. But here is what contemporary observers noted and modern historians still cannot explain. It struck healthy, well-nourished adults most severely, sparing children and the elderly. The opposite of almost every known infectious disease. It appeared to target the English almost exclusively. When it spread to Germany and the Netherlands in the 1529 outbreak, it killed at comparable rates and then retreated. Researchers began proposing hantavirus pulmonary syndrome as a candidate as early as 1994, based on the striking similarities in symptom profile, preference for healthy adults, and seasonal pattern. A hypothesis that has been developed in peer-reviewed literature since, though no pathogen has ever been confirmed. But hantavirus is not transmitted person to person, and this disease clearly spread through urban contact. In 1551, it didn't fade. It stopped. Instantly, completely. No known pathogen has ever done that. 10 diseases, 10 civilizations history barely mentions. The pattern isn't that ancient people were fragile, it's that the invisible things, the ones too small to carve into stone or capture in a painting, were running the course of history the entire time. Mainstream science has solved some of these mysteries and, in the process, cracked others open wider. Ancient DNA can pull a pathogen's identity from a 2,000-year-old tooth. But identity isn't explanation. Knowing the bacterium that struck Mexico in 1545 doesn't account for the hemorrhagic symptoms nobody can explain. Confirming bubonic plague in the Justinian era doesn't tell us why it made the medieval world inevitable. Most people walk through a museum, read the placard, accept the label, and move on. But you made it here, which means you notice the gaps. You understand that naming something and understanding it are 2 entirely different things. That instinct, the refusal to confuse a label for an answer, is exactly what this channel is built for. Subscribe and drop in the comments which of these 10 you think has the weakest official explanation. Make the case. The floor is yours. The monuments get the museums. The battles get the films. But the invisible things, moving through populations like smoke, Those were the ones that actually decided everything. They always were.